A common element in Christian worship is the gathering of the offering. Often plates are passed around, and the worshipers can put their offerings in the plates. And then they're brought up to the pastor who places them on the altar. In recent years, as cash and even checks have yielded to digital payment systems, many congregations have begun to offer and promote online platforms for giving offerings. So, what's the offering for? Well, on one level, a person could answer because the congregation has bills to pay. There's the mortgage, property maintenance, administrative expenses, heating and cooling, the pastor. And if a congregation is going to function, that requires resources. Since we all carry out this work together, we all chip in. Some churches use the word tithe to refer to the offering. This comes from God's arrangement in the Old Testament for taking care of the priests and Levites who were responsible for the administration of the Israelites' worship. Since their full-time work was supporting Israelite worship life, God had all the other Israelites give a tithe, which is 10% of their income to support the Levites. So those tithes served a very practical purpose. They would provide for the Levites so that the Levites could serve the people. Now that arrangement of the Levites administering Israelite worship, that went away when Jesus died on the cross. And so also, the mandate for the rest of the Israelites to support them with their tithes, that went away too. But the principle behind the arrangement still applies in the New Testament. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, the Apostle Paul talks about the responsibility a congregation has to support its pastor. In doing so, he quotes an interesting verse from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. Do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. So here's the point. While an ox is working to separate the kernels of grain from their husks, he should be able to be free to open his mouth and eat some of the grain. So in the same way, as a pastor serves a congregation, the congregation should provide him with material support. Or as Paul puts it plainly a few verses later, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. Similar to the Israelites supporting the Levites with their tithes, the salary that a congregation provides its pastor, it isn't so much payment for services rendered as it is support and honor for the person who devotes his full time to serving them. Still, the purpose of an offering is a whole lot more than to pay the bills and support the pastor. It doesn't just enable the congregation to worship. The offering is worship. It's a demonstration of love and trust. It's a token of where our hearts are. By offering something precious to God, we acknowledge that everything we could possibly offer him is actually already his, that he's simply entrusted it all to us to use to his glory, and that he'll still give us what we need even when we're generous with what he gives us. One way that God taught the Israelites that trust was by having them give him the very first part of the harvest. He called it first fruits. Now, an Israelite farmer might think, I have a better idea. First, I'll make sure that I have enough for myself and my family, and then I'll give the rest of the harvest to God, however much is left over. But it wasn't called the leftovers offering. First fruits. God was teaching them trust. Offer the first part to me, and then trust that there will be more to come for you. Well, how much of our stuff does God want? 10%, like it was for the Israelites? Well, here I would point out that the tithe was actually only a portion of the total offerings that the Israelites gave. But more important than that, God doesn't tell us 10%. He says 100. Another passage from 1 Corinthians. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Now, I'm not very good at math, but that sounds like 100% to me. So instead of viewing it like I owe this or that percentage to God, and then the rest is mine to do with as I please. A proper view of our possessions is that it all belongs to God. And He has entrusted some of it to me to use to His glory, which is to say that He's entrusted it to me to show my love for God and for my neighbor. Now, to translate that into a budget that includes offerings requires some wisdom, prayer, and also an honesty with ourselves about our inclination toward greed. How am I going to use the material wealth God has entrusted to me to show my love to God and my neighbor? God gives us principles such as first fruits giving, giving in proportion to our income, and regular giving. But He also gives us a lot of freedom to make decisions here. And He also gives us a promise that He'll use what we give, often in ways that far exceed our expectations, even if we're not millionaires writing six-figure checks. And the Bible is full of examples of that. Remember, for example, how Jesus fed the 5,000. He didn't start with nothing. He used the 5 loaves and the 2 fish given by a little boy. And His disciples asked, how far will this go among so many people? Well, Jesus showed them how much He could do with a little. Or remember the time Jesus and His disciples were watching people put money into the temple treasury. Lots of rich people were giving big gifts. But Jesus praises the poor widow who gave 2 very small copper coins because she gave all that she had to live on, even when nobody else notices, even if nobody else praises it. Jesus does. So 10% can serve as a helpful rule of thumb. In fact, to reflect that as a congregation, we commit 10% of the offerings we receive as a congregation to carry out mission work far away from us around the world that we carry out through our church body. 10% can serve as a helpful rule of thumb, but God is most concerned about the attitude of the heart. Here's how He says it in one place. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. There's a lot more we could say about offerings. 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9 is the most thorough section in the Bible about offerings. Our congregation recently developed a Bible study of those 2 chapters for a capital campaign. It's I think a 23-minute video. If you'd like to watch, you can click the link on the screen.